We better get on to Chelsea now and Frank Lampard's young guns, who just signed Thiago Silva and a bunch of the best players in Europe. So let's see how they get on this year. Definitely the most impressive transfer haul, David, I think we've seen this summer, and probably belies the circumstances. We talked about the pandemic earlier, but Chelsea don't seem to be paying much notice of it at the moment. Like, what's par for them? Do you think third place is enough? Do you think Abramovich should be satisfied with that, or do they need to be pushing for the title after all these signings?
Oh, Chelsea are just such a tough one to figure out. I mean, we've had this thing with them where it seems like every second or third season they'll bounce back and almost surprise everyone. Like, you look at the Conte season, it's so hard to know what to predict from them each year. But I think like things worked out quite well for Lampard last year with the not zero expectations, but he was given quite a pass in terms of, I know there's been jokes about how well Sarri did the previous year, but I think he's integrated a couple of young players. He's kind of sorted, the midfielders are more fluid, I think. And the signings are like, someone put it to me that it's probably the best Abramovich, never mind anyone else, the best Abramovich transfer window ever, possibly, or in a decade at least. But yeah, the expectations of him to manage, again, you're relying on all these new players. When you look at the caliber of players, you're talking about 5 or 6 players possibly slotting straight into the starting 11. So I think the way the Premier League has gone with the points tallies with the top 2 the last couple of years, you need to hit the ground running the first couple of weeks. Like, it can't take you a month or 2 to get settled. The title's gone by that stage. The way we've seen the last couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years. So I think expectations, I think you're looking at, you need to be challenging for the title, I would think, and potentially winning a cup competition or going quite far. I don't know what you think you both think the expectation should be.
No, it's exciting, isn't it, the way you put it there, that how Man City and Liverpool have set the bar, and it's kind of like the Dublin footballers over here, where they're not going to drop off, so it's up to the other teams to get to that level. And it is exciting to think that United and Chelsea are going to have to improve to that extent, and the likes of Arsenal and Spurs behind them, that, you know, it's not as if I don't think City and Liverpool are going to regress to the mean, especially in the next couple of seasons. So it should make for a great Premier League. But yeah, I don't know what Davey thinks, but Abramovich is going to be looking at Lampard and thinking, I know you're my friend, but, you know, time is, you know, the clock is ticking on you now. You're going to have to deliver me a title, if not this season, in the next couple of seasons. And, you know, Chelsea aren't overly generous with giving their managers time. What do you think, Davey?
Yeah, I think he had the one season to bed in, and he had the excuse of you know, there was a transfer ban, whereas the excuse is gone now, and he's been given the blank check. I mean, the quality of the players Chelsea brought in is very high. I guess it's got to the point where you actually don't know who's going to play, and some of the players actually do quite similar things. Like, I kind of thought when he was signed that Ziyech would be the number one playmaker, and then they bought Havertz, and then, you know, they still have Kovacic and Mason Mount, Jorginho, Kante, and then in attack, you know, Werner, and then, you know, they already had the young English players coming through as well, like Hudson-Odoi and Tammy Abraham. So, you know, attacking wise, it's an amazing array of talent. It's just whether they all gel and what sort of system they play to fit them all in. And then defensively, they have Chilwell and Thiago Silva will really improve them. All that's left is the goalkeeper, but I'm hearing they're actively looking for a goalkeeper, perhaps Edouard Mendy from France. So, I mean, they sort of covered all bases, and on paper it's a brilliant side, but it's just whether it all gels. But I think they have the potential to challenge for the title, because it's just been such a good transfer window for them.
It's funny. It's going to be funny to see how much this youth that he's been lauded for, how much these young players are actually going to play next year. Because I was reading today, there's talks of Tomori going on loan maybe to Everton. You look at Mount, as you mentioned, David, they're so stacked in midfield, and for those playmaker options, is Mount going to get a look in when you've got Havertz, you've got Pulisic as well, come into the team? Like, he's got to fit all these players in. Tammy Abraham is going to be himself and Olivier Giroud, I think, are going to be doing a lot of head scratching with all these incoming. Like, you imagine Werner's going to be the main man with his pedigree, and he's kind of coming in like that as maybe not the top level finished article, but I don't think he's too far off it. And he's a really good signing. Ziyech as well from Ajax, as you said. So it's going to be a funny. I don't know. We're going to see some outgoings at Chelsea in the next couple of weeks, but it's going to. He's got quite a job in his hands at getting this team to gel quite quickly, I think. Because I know if you drop 10, 12 points in the first couple of months of the season, as we mentioned just there, the title's probably gone. So expectations are going to be really interesting. Ronan, are you expecting them to challenge for the title this year, or do you think it's another couple of years down the line?
I think if the transfer window closed today, I think you'd have to definitely put them in the mix because they've just recruited so well. And it's actually probably the more low-key signings like Chilwell and Thiago Silva. I know Thiago Silva came in a free and is looking like a bit of a stopgap, but he brings a level of stability to that defence that was just absent the last couple of seasons. And Chilwell is actually, even though it was quite a big fee, I think it's good value for money given the English premium that comes with these players. And I think he's going to be England's left back for the next 5 to 10 years. So I think Chelsea have done good business there. The strange one is he seems ready to get rid of N'Golo Kante, and that seems to be a system thing where he just doesn't fit in the Frank Lampard system. But I think if you have N'Golo Kante in your squad, you sort of find a system that gets him in the team because no one does his job better than him in world football probably. And I think a lot of teams in the Premier League will be thinking, what kind of bid would we need to put in here to get him? Because he'd improve every squad in the league, I'd say.
In the world, I would say. This feels like it's a Juventus thing all over, where Juventus will just come in and sign N'Golo Kante for about 30 million and get one of the bargains in the summer. It's that nonsense thing that you mentioned earlier, Guardiola with Lamb. It's like Sarri comes in and it's Sarri ball, and let's turn the best holding midfielder in the world let's try and turn him into a more creative box-to-box midfielder. A system thing, whereas, as you said, I think Kante is still the best holding midfielder in the world. Look what he did. He won back-to-back titles those 2 seasons, Leicester and Chelsea, from that position. It seems ludicrous to change it, but I think someone's got to snap him up if he's available. Just a matter of who he goes to. One thing, though, I will say for Chelsea is the furloughing of staff. When things were going quite bad, there was no wage cuts to the players, no staff were made redundant. I know Abramovich may or may not agree with the whole thing about him and the way he's gone about his business with Chelsea, but without going too much into politics. But when you look at Arsenal, say, letting staff go and then bringing in Willian on huge wage, signing Gabriel, I think that's one thing I would give Chelsea in their favour, despite making all these big signings, that staff were made to pay basically with their jobs.
No, that's a good point, because it is a bad look, isn't it, when Arsenal released this public letter saying, we have to tighten the purse strings and then make a couple of signings and give Willian a big contract. So yeah, it didn't look great, but at least Chelsea, even though they are the big spenders of the summer, they have backed it up in other areas of the club, and it is worth noting. But it is just on the pitch again, and we mentioned the stacked options they have. I know Willian and Pedro have left, but do you think it's going to be more problematic tactically in terms of getting all these players on the pitch and giving them enough game time, or is it going to be managing the egos? Because we talk about Zidane and he gets lampooned a bit, Davy, for not being a great innovator, not being a great coach, but he managed to keep everybody happy in the squad, Gareth Bale notwithstanding. But when he was winning Champions Leagues, he was sort of keeping everybody happy. Do you think Lampard's number one priority this year is going to be making sure everyone gets enough game time, or could this lead to disharmony if the likes of Mason Mount and Tammy Abraham are being left playing with the under-23s while Kai Havertz and all the other lads are running riot?
It could, yeah. I suppose the only thing is you're looking at the Chelsea team and you're not really seeing that many superstars like a Neymar or Ronaldo. I suppose it's probably more like Man City buys, the kind of the De Bruyne and Sterling, the sort of 22, 23-year-old that are gonna be a superstar, but they're not quite yet. So in that way, I think he might be okay with dealing with that. And the likes of Giroud, I don't think are going to kick up a storm if they're not playing. You're mentioning Kante earlier. I think with all this attacking talent, I think the obvious thing to do is to play a Kante defensive midfield like Makalele used to play, and just sweep up for everyone. And I think he would really enjoy that role, because he's never really been that comfortable on the ball. But if he loses the ball, that's he's in his element. I think if you play a Kante defensive midfield, could add a lot. Whereas I could see him continue to play Jorginho in defensive midfield, and Jorginho is great at ball distribution, but I think he's always struggled a little bit in the Premier League against counter-attack teams, and it's probably part of the reason why Chelsea's defensive record is poor. And I think if you play Jorginho with all these attacking players, some teams could exploit that.
So we just covered the top four from last season. We'll get to once Garrett's back in the fold, we'll get the view from North London and whether Arsenal, 2 trophies, lads. If you want to count the Community Shield, Mikel Arteta has hit the ground running. So we'll talk about all that next time. But that's the top four from last season. Are we in agreement that's going to be the top four this season in some shape or form, or what do you reckon?
I think the 2 North London clubs have done quietly efficient business so far. I think Arsenal still need a little bit more, but I think Spurs made quite Mourinho signings, like Højbjerg, no nonsense midfielder. They needed a bit of steel in there. Doherty right back. We'll touch on that more, but pending what transfers come in the next couple of weeks, I think probably the top 4 we've named tonight from last season in some form will be the top 4 again. What do you guys think?
I agree. Yeah, I think Arsenal have a lot to make up. Although they look like they're on the right track, but they were mid-table last season. I think they drew so many games. I suppose they could turn them into wins, but I just don't see the same quality in Arsenal as the other 4 teams. And Spurs is hard to know, because Mourinho's second season has generally been his best season at every club, but I still see a few issues in their squad, and I think the other 4 are so strong. So I think they'll struggle to make up the gap.